And just real quick, I've reviewed the audits that have been done internally, and they're wanton in a lot of ways, and so I recommend you look at them. And two, I look at audits a little bit differently, and we're going to bring this within my subcommittee, Sub-5, later on to talk about this. Audits aren't necessarily bad. If the auditor comes and brings an audit to Sub-5 that basically says you need to increase the budget by X amount, and the functions that this money needs to go to is A, B, C, and we get our buckets, that's a much stronger argument for us to legitimately give you money. And we have an outside independent auditor saying that you need money for these different categories. So I don't necessarily always look at it as a bad thing. In some ways, I look at it as a way to validate why you need money, and most important, how much you need and how quickly you need it. And so I wouldn't just get all negative and everything about audits, but this could be a great way to help the judicial system. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Okay. One quick question I have regarding vacant positions and the backfilling of vacant positions with temporary contracted staff. Can you speak to that?
I'll briefly speak to that, sir. From my perspective as the presiding judge of San Bernardino County, we had an almost 27% reduction in our staffing over the years following the budget cuts. And I can tell you that as the money has slowly been coming back and as openings have been created based on retirements and others voluntarily leaving, out of the numbers of the people that were laid off, all but 2 have been rehired. And we look forward to the day when we bring back those additional 2 people. I don't know about other trial courts, but I would say that that is occurring up and down the state as well.
So my comments on that would be, at least at the AOC level, this was an issue that was highlighted by the SEC and again by the state auditor recently. The record, as I understand it, from the period of time of this issue being illuminated and now, there's been at least a 78% reduction in the use of these contractors for situations like that. It might not have been completely analogous to the situation that you described, which is going behind vacancies, but those are at least the rough numbers. I cannot tell you today what is the situation in terms of, but it's information that is knowable that we can get to the committee of how many vacancies you have and how many do you think you're using contractors to fill behind. I don't know if the auditor's team has that data. They may have it themselves.
Before she weigh in, do you happen to know what funds were used to contract out or pay salaries for these temporary individuals?
Well, for those rough numbers over that period of 3 years, no, I would not sit here and know that. I'm let out of my depth.
Does anyone in your
detail.
staff may be able to provide us with that answer?
If not immediately, so then certainly, yeah, they can do their best to drill down and figure that out, I'm sure.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Committee members? Mr. Stone, do you have any questions? Okay. Well, this time we want to open up for public comments. We would invite you to please line up against the wall. We would ask that you make brief comments, 2 minutes per person, and state your name and the usual information. Please come forward. Thank you very much.
Good morning, or good afternoon. My name is Tia Fisher. I'm a Los Angeles County Superior Court judge. I am here wearing the hat of a director of the Alliance of California Judges, an organization that I think of as the conscience of the judiciary. I thank the JLAC committee, Subcommittee 5, the Budget Committee, Assemblymember Joan Sawyer, and others of you who have taken the time and effort to address significant systemic flaws and that go well beyond culture. At the heart, it's about governance. And these, what was exposed by way of the excesses in this particular audit would have been known as excesses, but were not addressed, were not recognized until the public audit. When it was made public, that is when the standard, what I have seen over the years of history that I have been involved in, attempting to, as many others, shed light on the problems. It was this audit that then resulted in what I will refer to as half measures at this point, because whether you eliminate cars, reduce perks and pensions of the favored administrative leads in our branch of government, the core problem, what is at the core, is a problem with governance. What I heard and will certainly agree with from the standpoint of Ms. Howell's statement and testimony and the audit that came out was that there has been no meaningful judicial oversight. The Judicial Council, who I heard Mr. Hoshino reference as, once I became to learn what governance was about, we've got all the committees, we've got the Judicial Council who exercises oversight. The oversight is and has been a rubber stamp.
Thank you.
And that is what fundamentally needs to change, is ensuring governance, oversight, ensuring that the judges who serve in good faith have the meaningful information that they need at hand to provide that oversight, because the rubber stamp has been a green light for the AOC, a green light to move forward, to continue to spend irresponsibly, as was exemplified by the audit.
Judge.
The three things. The audit and its recommendations need to be implemented expeditiously.
Thank you.
There is a race for a cure. We who work in the courts are racing for a cure. There's a pathology, a metastatic bureaucracy, and what will address it? A Band-Aid approach, as has been the approach that is favored by the administrative office of the courts, favored by judicial leadership at this point. That Band-Aid approach is not a cure.
Judge, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm Kent Hamlin. I'm a judge of the Superior Court of Fresno County and also a director of the Alliance of California Judges. Thank you for the hearing today to review the audit. Thank you, Mr. Jones-Sawyer, for pushing through the charge for the audit. I think just one important point needs to be made here. We are not talking about a bucket of water in Lake Tahoe, as one of the council members so cavalierly described this audit. This is a lot of money that we're talking about as having been wasted and misused by this administrative bureaucracy, this unessential administrative bureaucracy. And we're not just talking about redirecting those funds to the court. I think what we're talking about is making them tighten their belt as the courts have done. And until this body and the governor are satisfied that they've done that, we can fully understand why monies are not being restored. However, it's important to note that when we talk about hundreds of millions of dollars that have been put back into our budget, hundreds of millions, almost $1 billion, were spent on things like CCMS and the $386 million of questionable expenditures here today that are described. And so if you just choose a half dozen courts at random, small, medium, and large around the state, and look at what we got as a bottom line 6 years ago and compare that to what we're trying to operate on now, I assure you we are not restored. And I appreciate your efforts to shine a light on this misuse of funds to help us regain the funds we need to keep our staff hired, keep our courts open, and provide access to justice for our citizens.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the audit and for the hearing. I'm Mark Natoli. I'm a court clerk in Los Angeles County Superior Court. I've been for 29 years. Vice President of the Court Clerks Union, Local AFSCME 575. And I also want to thank you, Ms. Howell, for all of your work over the years. My concerns today are we're only here, and what progress is being made by the branch leadership is only being made because of your efforts, because of the efforts previously made by Bonnie Lowenthal and others who have been on this branch for the better part of 5 or 6 years to reform, and we are still here today not where we need to be. The trial courts are hanging by a thread. We are barely able to provide minimum service to the public today. Thank goodness the economy has improved in our state. Otherwise, heaven knows where we would be. And without your efforts, Mr. John Sawyer, Mr. Gibson, and the others who've come before you and who are still working with you, we'd still be spending money on CCMS. We are very skeptical of this branch leadership's ability to reform itself. If you feel they deserve one more opportunity to show that they can do it, we trust you and we will be with you in making sure that they do. We are skeptical and we're watching. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, or Mr.'s Chairman. Libby Sanchez on behalf of Laborers Local 777 and 792, representing court employees throughout the state of California. I first want to take a moment to commend the fine work of the state auditor and to express my thanks to the committees for undertaking this no stone left unturned approach. I think the number one change that should be made when we're talking about comprehensive sweeping changes that should be made should be to table this erroneous idea that the judiciary is a separate yet co-equal branch of government for administrative and fiscal determinations. While it is a separate yet co-equal branch of government for judicial determinations, the legislature has the plenary authority to make appropriation and allocation determinations, and we respectfully request the legislature to implement all of the recommendations in the audit so that that direction can be undertaken. While I appreciate and I do trust the chairman who referenced some comfort he received from some of the statements made by judicial counsel, we unfortunately do not share that comfort. Part of the reason we don't share that comfort is in all of the various committees and task forces that we've heard about, there are never any rank and file employees included in these. In San Diego, had there been rank and file employees included in these committees, maybe they wouldn't have to sit on checks for so long because they don't have enough clerks to cash the checks that the checks have to be returned. In Riverside, maybe they wouldn't have spent $100,000 on a kiosk, which was English-speaking only, in a Spanish-speaking jurisdiction where nobody can use it.
10 seconds.
That's it. Thank you so much for this hearing, and we look forward to working with the committee.
Thank you very much. The last speaker at the end will recognize that individual as the ASME representative, so after you speak, that will conclude public comments. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I will keep my comments very brief. I'm very astonished to witness Martin Hoshino's statement here today that operation of the judicial branch is comparatively similar to operation of the state legislature, given the fact that appointments to all of the judicial branch committees are controlled by one person and one person only, and not by a democratic election process. Second, this is the second audit and the third report that has identified repetitive failures in the administration of the judicial branch. And if they're supposed to be leading by example, the only example has been evidenced by those reports and audits is that they're setting an example of what not to do. My final comment to you is to you, Mr. Assembly Member John Sawyer. 4 years ago, I sat in a hearing very much like this and advised Bonnie Lowenthal in the state legislature that there was an imperative need to audit the state court construction program. I reiterate that today. It needs to be done immediately. If you can't tell this from the prior audit of CCMS, you should certainly know it by now.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Good afternoon. My name is Irene Cordova. I'm a 35-year court employee for Riverside Superior Court. And I want to thank Assembly Members Joan Sawyer and Stone and everyone on this committee for listening to our request to audit the spending of monies by the AOC. For the past few years, I have used my own vacation time to speak to you about misspending and lack of transparency in AOC. It's disheartening to be in a meeting with HR or to hear in the news that there will be layoffs, job eliminations, court closures, and court furloughs. As was heard today, the people of California deserve better. We hopefully hope that from this point forward, the AOC becomes more efficient. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Ian Boggs. I work for the San Diego Superior Court. I've been there almost 2 years. I haven't been there a very long time, but I'd like to share my perspective about access to the courts. I work with the family law office, and we're not doing a good job of providing access to the public. Well, the feedback I get from people that go to the family law facilitator, which is the...
Please come a little closer to the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. The feedback I get from from people about their experience with the family law facilitator, which is our service for people who can't afford attorneys, is that they have to show up at 4 or 5 in the morning in order to get seen that day by the family law facilitator. After they go there, they come to the business office to file their papers, where their wait's often a couple hours, sometimes more. So sometimes they're there like maybe 8 or 10 hours throughout the day. They often have their children with them, and this is what they have to do in order to figure out the process to get child support or to see their children. We're not doing a good job of providing access to these people. So I'd like to thank each of you for your efforts to cut through these problems and get money to the courthouses where it's actually needed. And I'd also like to say, some people, I know that there's some talk about time, like 5 or 10 years to get through all these things. But I'm going to tell you, for people that need child support or people that need to see their
10
children,
seconds.
Time is of the essence. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not quite as tall as him. My name is Jennifer Wozniak. I work for Labor's Local 777. We represent San Diego and Riverside courts. For efficiency, I've written out my statements. First, I want to thank the committee. I want to also thank Ms. Howell very much. You're now one of my idols. We have worked throughout the recession with the AOC. We practically begged you each year for money to be allocated towards the judicial branch. We've fought for access to justice, to fund the courts, to ensure that that is provided to all Californians. And I don't know where to begin. That's why I had to write this out. But with this, the people we represent in both Riverside and San Diego courts deserve better. When we ask where the money is being spent, we deserve transparency, not the comment which we get, well, there's a little bit more money, but don't worry about that. Yeah, I worry about that. The 2,000 people I represent, they worry about that too. We deserve to know when the Corona courthouse is still closed to the public, why? Palm Springs courthouse still closed to the public, why? We deserve to know why there's an English-speaking only kiosk in traffic in Moreno Valley and not bilingual. We deserve to know why that is, but there is no transparency. We'd also like to know, in regard to San Diego Court, why we are contracting out a company in San Diego. They are paying someone in Sacramento to send civil and probate notices back to those in San Diego. That isn't efficient. That isn't efficient use of tax dollars. And that's an example. We'd also like to know why we're taking the death by 1,000 cuts, furloughs, layoffs. You mentioned thousands of employees have lost their jobs. Courts are still closed to the public. Why are employees who are struggling to stay in the middle class waiting almost a decade for a pay raise, but we see egregious misspending by the AOC?
10 seconds.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, Leslie Heimoff, Children's Law Center of California. We are the nonprofit law firm that contracts with the Administrative Office of the Courts to provide representation to the 30,000 foster children in Los Angeles County and the 3,000 foster children in Sacramento County. Many times there was comments made about the amount of money being spoken of as being small. I will tell you that for $1 million, I can hire 10 lawyers who will represent 2,200 children. And those children do not have any access to justice without a lawyer speaking for them because of the fact that they are indeed children who've been abused and neglected and who the state or the county have determined need our protection. We can't do our jobs, and we can't protect our clients, and we can't get them the access to justice that they need without some attention being paid to the court-appointed counsel line item in the budget, which was mentioned in the LAO's report. So thank you for your hopeful future attention to that.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. My name is Diane Edwards. I'm a courtroom clerk in San Diego County with almost 8 years there and 20 years in Riverside County courts. And I just wanted to mention I've seen a very big shift with the court's idolization or their determination to look at a strategic admission statement, as Chief Justice George had did when I was in supervision in Riverside. And it made a difference because the courts came together with operations and they talked to the employees involved to find out, you're doing the job, help us figure out what we see as far as giving more access to the courts for the public and technology and safety, and what is our mission and vision statement. We're looking at the administrative office of the court as our leadership. We need to redefine and get into this culture of what we need to do under the new administration and in leadership. For the court's direction. Our CMS in family law right now, as the courtroom clerk, I'm working in family law in Central. The system that we have it doesn't think. It's called Fast Track. It doesn't think. The one we're getting now called Odyssey, and it's a Tyler project. Odyssey, Tyler, I don't know, because there's no transparency. We need to know what's going on with our systems throughout the state, how we're going to be able to identify these concerns to address our public more efficiently. And I really, really think there needs to be something looked at with our systems and how we approach this technology and being consistent statewide, countywide, just talking to each other within San Diego County. There needs to be more communication and better forward looking at our mission and vision statement for the whole state of California. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Michelle Castro, the Service Employees International Union. I'm here representing trial court employees in 34 counties throughout California. First, I want to thank all of you for commissioning this important audit. It is a long time in coming. Also want to thank the auditor for doing a very thorough job in this review. It's very hard to separate the past from the present and the future. Because the past is often prologue to the future. We want to have confidence that there will be change in the judicial branch, but unfortunately, it's hard to really believe that that change is coming. What the audit demonstrated to us is, and confirmed really, a history of poor decision-making and hubris by the Judicial Council and the AOC. And that imprudence and hubris has been at the expense of services to the public, the members we represent. Again, the amounts of money that people are talking about may not be substantial, but they are substantial to the people who really needed services at the public level. They are substantial to the people who lost their jobs over these budget cuts. I just want to point out one last thought, that you, the legislature, have a substantial amount of authority over administrative and fiscal matters in the judicial branch. Just want to note the Judicial Council and the AOC are not courts of record, so any separation of powers issues really don't apply. It is historically clear and legally clear that the legislature has given those entities, the Judicial Council and AOC, authority, and you have the right to take it away. Their rule-making power is subordinate to yours. The rules cannot be inconsistent with statutes. So we just hope that you will exercise your constitutional and legal authority over these matters. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair and members, Pat Moran with Aaron Reed & Associates, representing the Orange County Employees Association. Again, I'd like to thank you for the hearing and the auditor and her staff for this fine audit. It just goes to illustrate what we've known for a long time, that this poor decision-making and hubris, as Ms. Castro called it, by the AOC, has led to, in the Orange County courts, a reduction in 400 staff members. It's resulted in the reduction in hours for court reporters to a point where they no longer receive full-time medical benefits. It has had a devastating effect in Orange County, and the 1,200 members that OCEA represents encourages you to implement the findings of the audit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Brian Allison on behalf of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. We also represent court employees across the state of California, and I want to thank you all for convening such a critical committee hearing to talk about some of the issues that are facing our communities across the state. I also want to thank the auditor for her fine work in uncovering some of the fiscal mismanagement that has happened within the judicial branch and the AOC throughout over the course of the years. I just want to point out the human impact of some of the funding mismanagement that's happened. In some of these cases, in some of these counties, you're talking about significant lack of access to justice. And I know that that's something that's been pointed out throughout the course of these, not only the budget proceedings this year, but in previous years. But when you talk about the small amount of money that folks are terming or saying exists within the auditor's findings, it really has a devastating impact on families across the state of California who need court services that have been greatly diminished through fiscal mismanagement by the AOC. So while it is critically important that we take a look at making sure we have adequate funding to the AOC and the judicial branch to make sure we have adequate trial court funding, it's also critically important that you as the legislature exercise your authority to make sure that funding actually gets to the trial court so that we can make sure that we restore access to justice in these communities. That's what folks here in the state of California would expect the state legislature to do, and that's what we'll be asking you to do throughout the course of this budget, the budget proceedings. But I also want to thank the auditor again and encourage the legislature to adopt the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to talk, even though that was the last speaker. My name's Brian McCabe. I'm the presiding judge of the Merced Superior Court. I'm also the vice chair of the Strategic Evaluation Committee that you folks have talked about. And I'm one of the primary authors of the 300-page report that you've looked at. So I don't need to tell you that I had a pointed and critical view on the AOC and its operations. And in fact, that report contains a lot of tough love after a gestation of 13 months, tens of thousands of documents, hundreds of interviews at all stages and all levels of the branch. What I'm here to tell you is it's because of my involvement in the Strategic Evaluation Committee, the chief placed me on the Judicial Council as an advisory member, along with two others, to help usher in the SEC recommendations. I've cautioned folks in the beginning that some of these are going to take time. And I've done that from day one in June of 2012. I reiterated that at the adoption in August 2012, and consequently at each and every annual review. I'd like to report to you, number one, that change is underway. Is more needed? You bet. Can it be done? It will be done. And I can report to you that this Chief Justice is committed to seeing change. I'd like to thank the auditor and Assemblymember Joan Sawyer, plus your fashion sense is impeccable. Thank you, sir, for commenting on the report. I was a pariah when I first came onto the council as the author. Since then, folks have begun to appreciate the report. And so I'm here to tell you that on the subcommittee with Mr. Hoshino, we're going to assure that those changes do occur. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We're going to invite Chairman Stone for final comments, as well as Mr. Jones Sawyer. But prior to that, Ms. Howell, if you could please go back to the microphone, if you would. Would you please lay out for all of us, this was a 60-day report. There is something that takes place at 60, something take place, that whole process, just so that everyone will know that we'll be monitoring this in incremental times. So if you can just...
Certainly, Mr. Chair. As Mr. Hoshino indicated, we just received a 60-day response from the AOC. Staff have taken a preliminary look at it, but we'll look at it in more detail and then comment on that. And then 6 months from the issue date, so it was issued in January. So in June, we should be expecting another status report from the AOC as to their progress in implementing the recommendations, and then there's a one-year window or time frame where we get another response, and then for anything that has not been fully implemented at that one-year mark, we work with the agency. We continue to expect the agency to report to us their progress in implementing any outstanding recommendations. So there is a subsequent follow-up process, and we're certainly more than willing to share our comments and thoughts on the responses. In fact, the responses are published on our website, so any staff or members are interested will see the response the agency provided in our perspective, but we are certainly more than willing to sit down with legislative members and staff and go over our perspective on the responses we receive.
And I would ask, moving forward, the 6th month that you can make yourself available for the report for each committee, and also at the 1-year mark, make your report available for the committee members of both committees.
Certainly, and another point, members, if necessary, those are periodic timeframes that my office has used historically. There have been circumstances where the legislature has requested my office to get more frequent updates from a particular agency. I think looking at the 60-day and then the 6-month will be in June, then we could give you some suggestions as to whether or not we want to wait another 6 months or do we want to see something from AOC earlier than that, so we can engage in that dialogue as well. I just wanted the committee to understand there are additional options with respect to more frequent responses from the AOC.
Thank you very much. Mr. Stone?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate being able to be on the dais for this hearing, and it was a very good hearing.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jones-Sawyer?
And I too want to thank you for allowing us to be on this dais today. And most important, just to remind everybody, Budget Sub 5 will be looking at the audit and the recommendations, and if we can, maybe even use some budget language to institutionalize some of this, so that we can move forward and ensure that accountability, access to justice, transparency, all of those things that have been discussed today, we hopefully will be able to do it through the budget process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to thank both Assembly and Senate members. Oh, Senator Bell.
Been kind of quiet. I just wanted to note that I'm, as addition to your committee, I'm also on the budget subcommittee in the Senate, and we will be looking at this through that process. And I thank you for everybody's testimony today.
Thank you very much for your comments, Senator Bell. Again, I want to thank all committees for being here and also weighing in on this very important conversation. I strongly believe that we must be a part of restoring not only access to justice, but also access to the communities in which we represent. We would certainly and continue to monitor this process as it moves forward. I want to thank the auditor, you and your staff, for doing an impeccable job, for your contribution, not only during the audit, but also your contributions you played here today, as well as the legislative analysts. I want to thank you very much, and also for the Judicial Council and the AOC for coming out and presenting your particular case. As the chair of the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, it is my intent to continue to provide oversight on important topics such as access to justice. Again, in closing, I want to thank everyone for your comments and our testimony to this body today. We stand adjourned. Thank you.